चलिए हम लोग अब बस शुरू कर रहे हैं। आप सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि आगे आकर दरी पर बैठ जाइए। आप सब स्टूडेंट्स जो यहाँ पे मौजूद हैं, आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। और JNU टॉक्स की तरफ से मैं नेहा आप सबका यहाँ पे वेलकम करती हूँ, आप सबका स्वागत करती हूँ। हम लोग यहाँ पे एक पब्लिक डिस्कशन के लिए मौजूद हैं। हमें मालूम है कि अक्टूबर 7 से अभी तक क्या चल रहा है इजराइल और पैलेस्टीनियन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में, जो नए चेंजेस आए हैं उसके बतौर, और उसी पर बात करने के लिए आज हम लोग यहाँ पे आए हैं। जो तमाम प्रोपेगेंडा चल रहा है मीडिया पे, बातें उठ रही हैं, वो उनकी असलियत और जो लगभग 70 साल का इतिहास है इस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का, पैलेस्टीनियन रेजिस्टेंस का, उस सब के बारे में हम आज बात करेंगे। आप सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है, मैं अपील कर रही हूँ कि प्लीज आगे आकर दरी पर बैठ जाइए, ताकि जो और स्टूडेंट्स आए वो लोग पीछे वाला स्पेस ऑक्यूपाई कर सकें, किसी को डिस्टर्बेंस ना हो। पहले ये जो प्लेटफॉर्म है JNU टॉक्स, इसको मैं इंट्रोड्यूस करना चाहूंगी। JNU टॉक्स is a newly founded student-driven open forum for discussion and public talk. We are a self-funded platform, and students and faculty of JNU have been our biggest support, both financially and even otherwise. I request you all सबसे पहले कि क्योंकि हम ये टॉक्स लगातार करवाते रहना चाहते हैं, ये हमारा तीसरा टॉक है, कि हम लोग ये टॉक्स इसलिए करवा पाते हैं क्योंकि आप जैसे स्टूडेंट्स और JNU के फैकल्टी हमारा सपोर्ट करते हैं फाइनेंशियली ये सब चीज़ों में। आप सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि अगर आप लोग किसी भी तरीके से इस प्लेटफॉर्म को सपोर्ट करना चाहते हैं तो आप प्लीज़ QR कोड आपके बीच में पास होगा, जितना आप कर सकें प्लीज़ हमारी मदद करिए, डोनेट करिए, जिस भी हिसाब से आप कर सकें, ताकि हम लोग आगे आने वाले समय में इस तरीके के टॉक्स और पब्लिक डिस्कशंस करवाते रहें। Now let me just introduce the topic briefly on the format of today's talks and the panelists. So the political conflict between Israel and Palestine is now about 7 decades old. On one side are appeals of anti-Semitism and the many stories of the horrors of the persecution of Jews in the Holocaust in Germany during World War II. All of these appeals are being used as a reason to assert that the Jewish people constitute a separate race and deserve an exclusive separate state of their own in the face of what is continuously being called by Western and Israeli media as aggressive and militant Palestinian people's assault. And on the other hand, is the historic evidence of one colonial force after another treating the land of Palestine as their playground. The Palestinian story is the story of dispossession and a loss of homeland to settler colonialism. It is the story of the Nakba, or the catastrophe of 1948, when the state of Israel bullied its way into existence and proceeded to make 7.5 lakh Palestinian people refugees in their own home. 15,000 Palestinians were killed between 1947 to 1949 alone. What has followed since then is one unprovoked assault after another, enjoying unflinching support from the Western world, and slowly and consistently eating away at the borders and pushing into the land of Palestine. From 2008 to September 2023, about 6,407 Palestinians have been killed to Israeli attacks and airstrikes. Today, we are here after Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israeli forces on October 7th. And since then, in the 4 days, about 2,000 people have been killed overall in the ongoing Israeli offensive. This is what we stand here to discuss. That is why we are here as JNU students, as professors, as our esteemed guests. This is what we will talk about today. Now let me briefly introduce the panelists. Our first speaker is Professor Achin Vanaik, who is a writer and social activist, a former professor at the University of Delhi, and Delhi-based fellow of Transnational Institution, Amsterdam. He is the author of numerous books, including The Painful Transition, Bourgeois Democracy in India, Hindutva Rising, and also from Warsaw. We welcome you here, sir. Thank you for joining us today. The second speaker, thank you so much for joining us, sir. The second speaker is Sukumar Muralidharan, who teaches at the General School of Journalism and Communication in the Delhi region. He has been a journalist and journalism instructor for over 3 decades, working mostly in the print media. We are very glad, we are very honored to have you here, sir. Thank you for joining us today. The format of today's talk will be, we request each panelist to keep their presentation for about 10 to 15 minutes. And after that, we will open the forum. After that, we will open the forum for question and answer. We request all students who are sitting here for the discussion to join in and write down their questions, because after the speakers have spoken, the forum will be open for discussion, and you can keep your questions and the speakers will answer them. We invite Professor Achin Vanaik here. We would invite him here to take the mic now.
Inviting me here. I want to start by saying how Israel is unique in the world. Truly unique. Number one, Israel has carried out the longest running illegal occupation of the 20th and 21st century, which has been sustained by the most brutal and violent repression that you can imagine. Number one. The longest illegal, brutal and violent occupation of the 20th and 21st. Second, it's the only country that tries minors in military courts. Tries minors, Palestinian minors, in military courts. Third, it is the only country that has not given officially an official, has not given an official map to the UN delineating its borders. An official map. India and Pakistan give their map to the UN. India and Pakistan both claim Kashmir, but Pakistan does not claim Delhi, and India does not claim Rawalpindi. Israel does not give an official map saying this is our borders. However, not so long ago, in late September, for the first time, Netanyahu goes to the General Assembly and he holds up a flag of the Middle East and says, this is the way for peace in Middle East, in which Palestine disappears and the whole of that area is in fact Israel. In proportion to its population, which country has the largest number of political prisoners in proportion to its population? Israel. The country that has the largest number of prisoners in relation to its population is probably the US. The country that has the largest number of under trials in prison is probably India. But the country that has, in proportion to its population, the largest number of political prisoners is Israel, and in some years, it has the largest absolute number. For a long time, Israel has been the only settler colonial regime or country state in the world. Baaki jo settler colonial regimes have all gone. For a long time, it has been the only settler colonial regime. Now, it has become the only settler colonial apartheid regime in the world. South Africa is over, the apartheid regime. And please note that when there was South Africa apartheid regime oppressing the people there, any number of countries that call themselves democratic supported the apartheid regime. So don't be surprised today that there are any number of democratic countries or countries that consider themselves democratic governments, including our government here in India, which are prepared to support South African, Israeli settler colonial apartheid regime. Lastly, there is systematically cultivated the myth of the perpetual victimhood of Israel. Jewish oppression, that's a separate thing. Many people have been oppressed. I'm talking about the myth of the perpetual victimhood of Israel, which is also being played today. This is a country that has the strongest conventional forces, stronger than all the Arab conventional forces put together. It has the only country in that region that has nuclear weapons. It is also backed by the most powerful military power in the world, the United States. And it goes on and on and on about its victimhood. The tragedy is that not just governments, but so many people are prepared to actually buy this. How does Israel get its way? How is it that Israel can treat the Palestinians in this way, this most incredible manner? It's been going, it's the longest run dispute of the 20th and 21st century. Let me tell you how countries get away with killing on a mass scale the population. Before you can kill anybody on the ground, you have to kill them in your mind. We think in language. We think in words. And when you can capture the meaning of words, you can shape it. So before you kill people, you have to dehumanize them. And there are various ways of doing that. So what did the Americans call the Vietnamese? They call them wargs. What do upper caste call lower caste? Dalits, not Dalits, but untouchables, achut. Right? What do men call women? Degrading them. Kya cheez hai? Right? Listen. How is it now? And what is the kind of label that is being used now to put the whole question of the Hamas attack into complete disproportion and to eliminate the kind of context in which this is taking place? Here the word is being used, terrorist. They are terrorist organizations. Let's understand what terrorism refers to. Because the moment you justify that this is a terrorist organization, not only is this whole debate on terrorism thoroughly dishonest and thoroughly hypocritical, it is of course extremely dangerous, because once you say that somebody is a terrorist or this organization is a terrorist, you then become entitled simply to kill them. Regardless, you don't have to bring them to justice, you don't have to have a court, a trial, a jury, show them guilty or whatever, just do that. Now when we use the term terrorism, please understand, and this is very important, terrorism must not be seen as a reference to a category of persons. It is a reference to a technique, a method, a tactic. That's what it is, a means. It is precisely because it is a reference to a technique, a method, a tactic, that you have three kinds of agencies of terrorism. You have the individual, you have the group, and you have the state, the apparatuses of the state. All of them carry out from time to time terrorist acts and even terrorist campaigns. You call Hamas terrorism, but does anybody call Israel a terrorist state? M.A. Baby tried to do so, he was shut down by his own party. Now, the point here is that you have to be very, very careful, because this label is so dangerous that it actually leads to this kind of activity, this kind of designation over here. So remember this. The other point you have to remember is that the terrorist acts and campaigns of the state are much wider. The scale is incredible, much, much greater. We're talking about, in the case of the United States, externally, millions. We're talking in the case of the Israelis, over the period of time, tens of thousands. Scale. Why is the scale bigger? One, obviously because they have much greater means. But the more important reason is that they are trying and they are able to hide it behind grandiose ideas. Our existence is at stake. We are fighting for democracy. We are fighting for the unity and integrity of India and all that sort of stuff. We are fighting against communism. Or in the case of the Soviet Union, we are fighting against capitalism. You have to support us. So let's be very, very careful. And please notice how the Indian media and everybody else here, including the Indian government and all, is saying terrorism about Hamas. But avoiding the context in which all this has taken place, and that is this brutal occupation and the kind of brutality that has been done in Gaza, and of course the West Bank, but in particularly Gaza, for so long. Does it mean, if we understand terrorism as involving the death of innocent citizens, that we should not condemn it? Yes. But let us understand that in this particular case, while everybody is going on and on about Hamas, it's ignoring the context in which it is doing this, and it's eliminating the idea of Israel being any kind of a terrorist. Another point that you have to understand when it comes to the question of violence. Unless you are a complete pacifist, you will say that the people have the right to defend themselves, even through arms. That's the history of India. Oh, sorry. What? In the Indian case, people also used, whether it was Sebastian Bose, whether it was Bharat Singh, others, that there is a place for that. The Vietnamese fought. Many national liberation struggles fought. But we must make a fundamental distinction between the violence of the oppressor and the violence of the oppressed. The Palestinians have been a people since Second World War who have been the most incredibly brutalized and oppressed people here. They have. Do they have the right to use violence? Yes, they have the right. Doesn't mean that you can do it indiscriminately or whatever. Yeah. But yes. So the oppressed has the right in self-defense to use self-defense, armed self-defense. But in the case of the oppressor has no right to continue to use arms or even non-armed means to continue oppressing. Israel has no right to carry on its oppression. Yeah. Keeping this in mind, I think it's very, very important to understand the context in which this is taking place. I'm sure Sukumar will be saying more about this, and even about Hamas and the, let me just say a few things about the Palestinian struggle very briefly. I won't say much about the early period, that can come in the discussions if you like. But the rise of Hamas really took place in the 1987 to 1993 First Intifada, which was an uproar, a spontaneous struggle, basically non-violent, in the occupied territories. In 1987, 93, it became part of that. As a result of that Intifada, which shook a lot of people, there was a movement. That's one of the main reasons, not the only one, but a movement towards the Oslo Peace Accords. Edward Said, Diana Bhutto, and many others said to Arafat and the PLO, don't go in for the Oslo Accords, it's a disaster. And it was a disaster. Because what the Oslo Accords did, if you like, was to actually force or get the, was to actually turn the PLO, the leading body in the occupied territories, into a subcontractor for that occupation. That's actually what happened. Before this, the Palestinian struggle was insisting that you must accept the right of return of all Palestinians. What Arafat and the PLO did was to say, we will make this a negotiating question. I'll come to that at the end. We will negotiate about it. And in the Oslo Accords, the PLO recognized the right to exist of Israel in that part. But the Israel did not recognize the right of Palestinians to have a state. It only recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Within 5 years of 1993 Oslo Accords, there was supposed to be final status negotiations. Okay, you, Israel, at this part, 78%. The remaining 22% will become ours. What happened after 1993 to 1994 continued. That the Israelis moved further and further. In Gaza, they internally colonized it. They had about 8,000 settlers in Gaza after the Oslo Accords, which was, compared to the population of Gaza then, was half of 1%. Not 1%, half of 1%, but controlling through their lands and of course the Israeli forces 1/3 of Gaza. And then Gaza builds a wall along the border with Egypt, so that Gaza has become the largest open-air prison in the world, in which you have the Rafah crossing blocked, Egypt, electric fences and others, and sharpshooters on this side of Israel, and then you have the waters. And incidentally, in the waters you're supposed to have 12 nautical miles, that is your own territory to fish. The Palestinians in Gaza do not even have those full, because the Israeli ships and all prevent them from that. And now because they think that they have oil there, they want to dig that and all that. So anyway, this is the situation there in the war. What does Israel do in the West Bank? Apart from systematically expanding and of course using violence, various kinds, they are building a wall which they said is to prevent terrorism along the Green Line, which is the line that is supposed to divide the Israel of the Oslo Accords from Palestine. That's about 750 kilometers. And the wall they are building is already twice the size. You know why? Because it is extending into Palestinian land and taking that. And in fact, you have Palestinians stuck in villages and discovering there. And of course, what the Israelis are doing is because the water that they have, much of it, as well as for Palestinians, comes from the Palestinian occupied territories. 85% of that is used in Israel, and only 15% left. And they want to maintain control, so they're also using the wall there. The situation in the Gaza is miserable. It's just terrible. You cannot understand the rise of Hamas if you do not understand the failure and the fact that the PLO Fatah has actually been a disaster for the Palestinian people. And so many more Palestinians are realizing this in a certain sense. And there has also been an evolution in Hamas's thinking. Hamas has moved, and their leaders have said, we are prepared to accept the two-state solution. But they're saying we're not going to recognize Israel. They have seen the disaster of what the PLO and the Oslo Accords did. In other words, they're saying we will do it in the context only. And they've said that twice. But the two-state solution is being finished off. It's being finished off by the Israelis. And in finishing it off, they of course have to fight against the resistance and the oppression that is taking, not provocation, but against the kind of, all kinds of forms of resistance, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, are having become excuses for the Israelis to really hit back tremendously. Once you decide that this is a terrorist organization, you can go in and whoever you think is a member, you can kill. Second, please note what Israel is doing and has been doing for a long, long time, well before this incident. Any incident that they think justified can justify, or even without that incident. If there's some rocket fall or whatever, they exercise collective violence against the people of Gaza. Collective violence, just hammering them in various ways. How do you do this? You do it, remember, by dehumanizing the Palestinian people. There have been in 2008-10, in between lots, but 2008-10, Operation Cast led, In 2012, Operation Pillar of Defense, and in 2014, you had Operation, what was called Protective Edge. Let me read out to you the kind of dehumanization of the Palestinian people that is done by the top leaders of the governments of Israel. Not necessarily just Netanyahu and others. Let me just read out. Sorry. During the Deputy Prime Minister, during the 2012 Gaza bombardment, Deputy Prime Minister Eli Ishai said, "We must blow Gaza back to the Middle Ages, destroying all the infrastructure, including roads and water." Moshe Feiglin, the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset and head of the Jewish leadership faction of the Likud party, laid out a 7-step plan for Gaza that included giving a single ultimatum to the enemy population, defining any who did not move from Gaza to Sinai as the enemy and destroying all infrastructure. Shortly before Protective Edge, the 2014 attack, their Justice Minister, Ayelet Shaked, made what amounted to an explicit call for war crimes on Facebook shortly before Protective Edge. She said, Justice Minister of Israel, "The Palestinian people has declared war on us and we must respond with war." This is all before Hamas. Who is the enemy? The Palestinian people. In wars, the enemy is usually an entire people, including its elderly and its women, its cities and its villages, its property and its infrastructure. Women who gave birth to martyrs should follow their sons into the graves. Otherwise, more little snakes will be raised there. These are statements made at the very, very highest level by top leaders. And you are hearing them now by Netanyahu and many others as well. Such is the incredible level of hostility and hatred that is being done there. Having said this, what is truly remarkable is the courage of the Palestinian people to carry on. Let me end because I'm only going to speak for now 5 minutes more. Maybe I've spoken a bit too much already. Let me say some things. One, of course, is I talked about the evolution of Hamas, the fact that it won a majority in the first election to the Palestinian National Council in 2006. But then, of course, the Fatah leadership and, of course, the US and Israel and all, of course, promoted a civil war and a conflict between the two, and it ended up with Hamas controlling the Gaza and Fatah controlling the West Bank. What's happening, of course, is that even as we understand the right of an oppressed people to resist with arms, my own view is that strategically, this is not really the direction to go. The reason for that is that for all the talk about this existential threat to Israel now and all, how are you going to fight a force which is not just as powerful, but has no hesitation in using this in the most incredibly brutal manner, and is even confident that you will have any number of governments that will support it? After the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then this includes China and Russia of today and others, two things happened. At the governmental level, many more countries moved towards Israel. But in certain parts of the world, in civil society, in the United States of America, in Western Europe, in UK, you had more and more citizens, including young generations of Jews, coming to oppose Zionism and to support the cause. The degradation in India is that because of the media, listen to the media and all here, if you stand up for the Palestinians, they'll say, oh, you're a Muslim or you're a lefty. But you know, if you stand up for the Palestinian cause, you don't have to at all be a Muslim, you don't have to be a lefty, You don't have to be a Palestinian. You only have to be a decent human being who understands the incredible crime and injustice that is done to the Palestinian people. That is something that... What do I think will be the outline or outcome of what is going to happen? Well, on one hand, you see what Israel is going to do and is doing. And it's going to be very, very brutal. There are voices in Israel calling for ethnic cleansing. Because one thing Israel cannot do, although it's trying its best, and there are people who say that, is cannot do what the older settler colonial regime did in Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom and elsewhere. And that is to eliminate the people. Can't do that. What's the second best? Ethnic cleansing. Throw them out. Where? Jordan? They don't want it. Egypt? Where do you do that? That's a huge problem. The second problem for them is that generation after generation of Palestinians in the diaspora and elsewhere have kept the struggle and will keep on giving the struggle alive. So this is something that's a real problem for the Palestinians, for the Israelis in the sense that they can't do that. But what can the Palestinians do to move towards it and to change the situation? My own view is that what Hamas has done may have enthused a lot of Palestinians and others because it has shown that we will have to continue resistance. But you cannot defeat Israel this way here. Your struggle will have to be essentially strategic and on the lines of what was the first Intifada. It's very easy for me to say it, but the Intifada, basically non-violent movement, strategically speaking, you may need to have a small armed forces for self-defense because they'll come and kill your family and all that here. But you have to have the kind of struggle that can win the political support of more and more people. And that really means that the Palestinians will have to fight non-violently, basically, as a strategy, and to have a political struggle that actually seeks to expand the struggle for greater democracy outside. Because I can tell you one thing that can shift the whole relationship of forces and changes there, and that is that something happens outside of Palestine, in the Middle East, because this is an area in which you have dictatorships of various kinds. And if there is the overthrow of one of these dictatorships in a serious way, what happened in 2011, it eased the situation for the Palestinians before the army came back in 2013 in Egypt. If you can adapt, and they know it, and when you have your Indian diplomats and your foreign policy experts, even here in JNU or whatever, who says that, you must understand why India supports has good relations, has improved relations with Israel. After all, the Arab countries are also doing that and moving towards it. Why should we be more Arab than the Arab? What they mean, of course, is that we should be just like the Arab governments. Because there is a profound difference between the Arab governments and the people that they rule. They're dictatorships, and they don't like it, and the vast majority of the people in these countries here, not the governments, because these governments all play games. Today they will support Hamas, or they will support this, and then they won't support that. It applies to Iran, it applies to Saudi Arabia, it applies to all of them, etc. But they know that the public there is very much solidly supportive of that. So that is also one crucial development that should take place. The third development, in my view, is that forget the two-state solution. You need a newer kind of leadership. Yes, the Hamas have shown that they're strong, but Hamas is not the answer to the kind of leadership that leads. And the PLO is not the answer to the kind of leadership. You have young Palestinians, both in the Gaza Strip and who are wanting a new kind of a leadership. And if they can move in that direction, and if they can recognize that the two-state solution is finished, then their focus should be Israel is a settler colonial apartheid state. We want the removal of apartheid. We want justice and greater equality within this context. Here the tricky thing is that more and more Palestinians are coming around to this view. That let's have an equality, the end of apartheid within us. But it's the Israeli population that is hesitant much more strongly about that and want to do it, and they want to move forward and forward. It's not a positive situation, but I personally think that this strategy is the only real strategy that can move forward. Things can change if there is an removal of one of these regimes. But let me end by saying that our responsibility here in India is to stand up and speak for justice and decency and for the Palestinian cause against our own government, against this disgusting media everywhere which is prepared to support Israel. We must speak out to that. And you know, the Palestinian issue is not complicated. Lots of issues are so complicated. Kashmir ka ye kya, ye wo, you have to do that. This is so simple. It is so simple and so clear-cut. Who are the victims and who are the victimizers? You can have your positions on this, that, etc. But this is the one great international test of the extent to which you have a fundamental moral political decency. I sometimes fear that as young people grow old, the kind of issues that are more important to them become the questions of careerism and consumerism. But if you have just some element of decency, it should reflect itself in this, the most clear-cut case. And we must keep on fighting here. We owe it to the Palestinian people to continue to fighting, to show our solidarity in whatever way we can. But we owe it to ourselves. This is a test for where we stand. Just how easy we are. I think this is something that if you have any respect for yourself and for any sense of morality, then it means a question of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Thank you.